Hi, brides. I'm Yvonne van der Hoff, and you're here with me on our podcast, which is the first one for Enter by the Narrow Gate Homeschooling for Him. And with me here is author of the book Enter by the Narrow Gate, Erin Thiele. Hi, Erin. Welcome.
I'm so happy to be here. This is exciting.
Yes, and we're so happy to have you here. So if you can just say a few words about yourself, if you can just introduce yourself to the audience for those that don't know you.
Well, I have on my website that I don't know now if I have minister first, but I'm a minister, Mimi, which is as a grandmother, mother, motivational speaker. I seem to love to motivate anyone, whether it's an Uber driver or one of my children. A sister that I just connected with again. I think that's probably it. And encouraging women. That's what my son, Easton, always loves to say. Mom, you just encourage me so much. You should have a ministry called Encouraging Women or something. And so we always laugh about it. So I guess that's what I am the most.
Thank you so much. Yes, and today you're here because you are one of our experts when it comes to homeschooling for him, having 7 children. And I think at one time, if I'm not, please correct me, you've homeschooled all 7 of them?
Yes. I mean, they weren't
Yes.
all, well, by the time Dallas was 16, when my youngest Macy was born. And so, and also he finished quickly his schooling. He was very bright, very motivated. And one of the reasons we did homeschool him. But so they couldn't all be homeschooled. By that time, he was well out of school. But I did have all 7 children when I was trying to homeschool all of them. So that
Wow.
yeah, that was the most challenging. But do you know what? It was the most fun. But you have to work up to that for sure. I don't think I would have wanted to have to be thrown into it like a lot of people got forced into homeschooling without any preparation. That's a whole other type of homeschooling than we're talking about, just because you are forced to be locked in and, bring your things home. But even then, what I've learned is that mothers are definitely the best teachers by far. And we do a lot more, even if you have your children in school, you do a lot more teaching your children than
Yes.
If they're successful, not that it's not happening in the school, but it's really has a lot to do and mostly to do with the mothering that we do. So I don't want to get ahead. I know you have questions. So
Yes, I do have questions. And yes, it's definitely the mothering. I totally agree with you. And we have more invested than a teacher, we're
exactly.
investing in our children. So there's much more for us to invest in than it would be for a teacher who is dedicated, but for her, it's mostly just, a job. So for us, it's it's just where our heart is. So
Exactly. Go ahead.
my first question to you is why homeschooling? Why did you decide to homeschool? What in particular was it that made you want to homeschool your children?
Well, it's interesting because I said, everybody was just recently forced into it, or a lot of the people that were started homeschooling, during our lockdowns that happened all over the world, they were forced to, and it happened suddenly. But I had to laugh because as soon as I said that, in my mind, I remembered I was pretty much forced into homeschooling too. However, prior to that, my husband, my maker, the Lord, he was preparing me for it, but I didn't know. And so I had to be kind of forced into it. There was just a very unfortunate situation. 2 of my children were in Christian school, which I just noticed. Adina, she had mentioned her children are in Christian school. I didn't know that. But mine were in Christian school, and my son, my younger son, he was only in kindergarten. Dallas was in the 2nd grade, and he had been sick for oh, it was a couple weeks. He always had been a little having issues. He had pneumonia when he was just young. And so we kept him home. And then his teacher came to bring him or just to come visit. But she was a good friend, actually the pastor's wife. So you couldn't get any better situation than that. But I could tell that she was having a hard day. And, like I said in the beginning, I'm an encouraging woman, So I'm like, let me treat you to something. Let me get you some tea. What's going on? And the children were away playing. And then she told me about a situation that was happening with one of her students. And they had uncovered that this young boy had been exposed to by the babysitter's boyfriend, some sort of satanic ritual that he was going to after school in this very small town. And I was like shaking. I was like, oh my gosh, what if my boy, this boy that absorbs everything and is so, well, we've talked before that your son and my son are similar in similar ways. Every child is unique, but you can understand that if he was going to be exposed to this, I just knew. And I knew, oh my gosh. And so we've got to pull them out. And I had already been having trouble with the teacher, the second grade teacher, because as I mentioned, Dallas was just so bright. He was just wanted to learn. Come to find out, he has a photographic memory, who has that? And so they couldn't keep up with them. And we were paying them to try and keep up, but he wasn't. And I was concerned about that because my mother had always told me that some of the ones that really got into trouble, like myself, it's because you're intelligent and they can't, you're not challenged enough. And that's why it's just so nice for a mom to have her child and to know them from birth, their personalities, everything about them. And like you said, nobody can invest into them or suffer the consequences. A teacher, if they're not a good teacher, they walk away from it in a year or something. But we're left with whatever damage is done. And sometimes like that, in this situation here, it was my close friend and she didn't have, but what was happening is that the little boy was sharing all these details with the classmates. I think I left that part out. And so if my son had heard that, I just saw the damage. So they never went back. I said, it has nothing to do with you. And she said, look, I totally understand. And so I told them they're not going to go back. And so I didn't take anything to talk to their dad and my husband. And he said, yes, let's take them out. So we grabbed their books. And because it was a Christian school and we had to pay for all of our books up front, we just brought them home. And in the podcast that I just put before this, it makes me laugh now, but I think it's just very typical. We set up a little classroom, because I wanted to. And here's the thing, I never intended to do this forever. I just thought until we get out of this small town, that's as far as I went, let's just get them, we're in this small town. There's no other Christian school option. And so we're just going to do it until then. And, but of course that, the rest is history. And so I never, the longer I did it, the more I saw the beauty of it, the benefit of it, and just would never want to do anything else. So I don't want to go off. I know you have questions, but nice. I think that answers how did I end up? That was it.
Yes, and what is that something happened that made you homeschool? I really thought that it was just your desire to homeschool.
No.
I didn't know
no,
that you were really
I didn't want anything to do. Afterwards, I could see, it's like the Lord knew my heart and my desire, and it just fitted so well. And I don't know, but and here's the thing too, just to show how foolish I am, is that I had met when it was, I think I was pregnant with Easton, a little a family, and they had children that were the most, I was just in awe of how they could interact with the adults in the room, how respectful they were to their mother, how they were so great with all of the, with the children that were there. They were doing a baking demonstration, for a bread making thing that we grind our own flour from seeds and this whole thing. My mother treated me to it. And then I found out that they homeschooled, but if that weren't enough, we were living in California at the time, and I knew that the father was head of all of LA City schools. That was one of the largest school districts in all of the country, and yet he had his wife homeschooling. Now, you think that I would have gotten it? Nope. I didn't get it. And another challenge too, which was interesting, is after I pulled them out and they started later in school too, because we moved to another state, and so Dallas started later. Everything that happened, it had nothing. Sorry, I'm saying there's not one thing that was my plan. It was all him doing it. I'm just. I say I'm the fool to confound the wise. Absolutely. I have nothing to do with anything. So any success is all due. And I'm not just saying that, it really is. And people who know me best know I'm being totally honest about that.
Yes, for sure. So when I introduced you now as author of Homeschooling for Him, Enter by the Narrow Gate. Now, there's so many mothers out there that's homeschooling, but I'm sure none of them's thinking of writing a book about homeschooling for him. So can you tell us what led you to write a book about homeschooling, especially you being the author of some of the other books? Why specifically homeschooling then?
I really wish I actually wrote a book. If you go to it and you look at the book, it really isn't so much a book. And I knew you were going to ask these questions, but I thought it just shows again. I think that even the way that I'm fumbling around and answering the questions just shows that every single one of you mothers who are listening are more than capable of educating your children and teaching them how to want to learn. How do you do what do you do with the older children, or once they get to having to learn all these other things? Well, back in the time, there wasn't YouTube. So now it's even easier, but you teach them to want to learn, and that stays with them their whole life. All my children love to learn. They love to absorb, and they know it's not just going to the library. They do know it's going to the expert or the person who knows, who's in that field. Whatever it is, they want to learn. And so is once you get past that they can read, then it's really easy, after that. But as far as the book goes, they were actually the notes that I created for myself, and they were kind of study notes that I passed out when I was asked to teach. What they actually came to me, I think, and said, we want you to be one of our teachers. It was a mega church that our family was attending when we were living in Ozark, Missouri. And they wanted to offer these classes for women. I think it was one day a week. I think it was a Wednesday or something. But anyway, and they were going to offer a lot of different classes. So they just said, what would you like to teach on? And a lot of people had been asking me about it. Oh, tell me more about homeschooling. So just like the Be Encouraged videos that I recorded, they were to meet a need, because I kind of got tired of people asking me, well, how do I do this? And what curriculum? And we had moved up from Missouri. When I was in Florida, I started speaking at our homeschool meeting. It was Introduction to Homeschooling. And I started out just speaking to maybe a half a dozen, would come. It grew and it grew and it grew until we were packed out in Pensacola. just became like a mecca for homeschool families. Mostly just because I was telling them, you can do it. And whatever challenge, like, what about this or what about that? He has the answers. Most of the time I wouldn't know, but he just gives me those answers just based on all the things that have come against me, because there's a lot that will come against you in that, family members, you name it, it's going to come against you. However, it just proves that it's one of the best things that you could give, the greatest gift you could give your children. And not everyone is going to be able to do it. We did talk about Adina earlier on, some, the husband, the father, you could be separated and they don't want to do it. But even then, homegrown, doing, the homeschooling. But since this is all about homeschooling for him, that's what it comes down to. So those were just notes. And I said, I want to do a homeschooling class. I think I had about 20 something women in the class, and my son, Easton, he filmed it. Somehow those tapes were destroyed, but we do have the audios for it. So it's the notes from that. And in a way, I think it's just beautiful anyway, because it's not really how to do it. It's not even my story. It's just more encouragement. There's a lot of scriptures in there that would resonate, but I do think going through there, just feeding your soul, that I'm hoping this is a great supplement, to have these, and maybe we'll have more of these, especially if people come with questions,
Yes.
other mothers, or this is what my husband's saying, or this is what my in-laws are saying, because you do get a lot of opposition. And I know we haven't even spoken about the fact that you homeschool now, which I'm just still in complete awe, because prior to everything, it wasn't even legal in your country.
Yes.
Correct?
So for a time it wasn't legal, and then it was legalized. I have no idea how long ago it was legalized, but it's actually now that you say that, it's actually astounding to hear in how many countries it's still not legal to homeschool. Like in my country, we do have to follow the curriculum of the school, even homeschooling. We cannot teach just anything, because they still need to write certain exams in order to pass every year. But that's still better, because I can navigate the children through those things that I don't agree with what's in the
That's
the
exactly
books and so
it.
on. So I can help and I can navigate them through it. But there is a lot of places, and I didn't know this, that still has that it's not legal to homeschool your kids. I spoke to Isabella in Costa Rica. There isn't a homeschooling option for them because it's not legal in their country, which I didn't know. Yes. And I think that brings me to the last, or one of the last questions, the second to last question, is that especially here in South Africa, well, I must admit, let me just confess that before I homeschooled, before I got to know the Lord as my husband, it was really, I also had this connotation or this stigma that was attached to homeschooling, that the only ones that's homeschooling are children that has problems, children that has, can't learn in school or can't sit still in school.
Oh, really? Isn't that funny?
Exactly. So
it's funny because there's stigma here on homeschooling. I knew you were going to say something about it, but please continue. So that's what they think. It's like people who have children who have trouble, you would homeschool.
Yes, exactly. So you would homeschool your children if they have like a learning disability, or even if they can't sit still. What is it? All the diagnoses that they have these days with all of the alphabet numbers.
Yes.
They would say, that's where you that's why you're homeschooling your children. But I just want to say, from my perspective, when my daughter, when she joined this little art class that she got, and all of the girls there are homeschool children. And if I meet those children, they are the most beautiful, loving, most best behaved children that I've seen in such a long time, And then I'm like, why are people saying anything about homeschooling that's so negative when you look at these children and you see this, So I just want to hear your thoughts on that. Is it the same in your country, and
Yes,
how,
yes, for sure. It's not like, okay, so the fact that your children, if they would pull them out because they couldn't sit still or something, I think that's wonderful. That doesn't happen here. They just put them on some sort of drugs that just make them, oblivious to things. They can control
yes.
them. And I just think I just can't imagine you doing that to a child and it not coming back that child is addicted to some kind of drugs. I just,
Yes.
I'm there's diet changes, but whatever it is, that's not the way. So if they pull them out for that, that's a great thing. And I did have rambunctious little boys, and I remember when they would get like antsy, I remember sending them outside and having them just run around, run laps around. I even put together a exercise tape just to give me a chance to and hey, we didn't have anything like what's available now, but just to show you, this is back in the dinosaur days with homeschooling. But I put together a tape recorder, with the cassettes, the little ones. Yeah. And I put it together where it was exercising, like do 10 jumping jacks, and I would count on there, and I did it with them. And then I even had one that was for when it rained, because I hadn't thought that, because we were living in Florida at the time. Oh, what if it rains? How am I going to get them running around to really tire them out? And so I had them run up the stairs and then run down the stairs, to do these things. So you just do, as women, as mothers, we are creative. God created children inside of us. We are born that way. And we might not be as creative as this person or that person. I'm not really creative in myself as much as some people are, but I can mimic things, I can come up with it. And usually I just ask, the Lord, help me to do this. And that came up. So anyway, I know I've gotten way off the topic. Oh, the freaky people. So here's what it is in the United States, at least back when, and I'm not sure what the stigma is now, just after COVID and homeschooling. It's just much more. But I do hear people talking very negatively, mostly because they're trying to do some online school and be in a classroom, and I think that would be very difficult to do. But back when I was doing it, the stigma these were kind of, I don't know, not hillbillies, but kind of like freaks, they only wore denim dresses back in the time, that were down below the knee, and, that sort of thing. Though, if you look back on some of my pictures, with my kids, they were that, but it was the style. I assure you, we didn't stand out in a bad way. I've always been about fashion, and I grew up like that with my mother and stuff. So, but I think that one of the things that people were always amazed in, besides them being well behaved and everything, like you said, and delightful children, was that we were so, quote, normal. Wow, you're not what we expect, you're not some crazy person. And when you get them in a group, it's phenomenal. I'll share a story too, because at one point, it's a long story and maybe I'll share about it later on, but for PE, or physical education, back, we had it. I started a swim team, and it was really because my oldest son, I've mentioned him before, Dallas, he was supposed to have surgery on his hips, and a long story. Instead of doing that, we had another doctor who said, no, exercise is better. And my mother was there, and she said, oh, what about swimming? My daughter was a swimmer. Oh, that's perfect. So I started a homeschool swim team, only with one other family, because I thought, if I just do it myself, it's not going to happen. I won't stick to it. So I had another friend who had, I think she had 11 children by that time. I don't know. It's a big family. And I thought, okay, I can drop my two youngest off, and then I can take the two that are capable of swimming well enough to be on the swim team. And they were homeschool age. and I'll take those, but I'll drop off my 2 and I'll take 3 of your girls. So that's how we started. And it's similar to what you were doing, with your daughter in this art class that she has. And that grew to I think I had probably 60 children. And
wow.
I know. And this was after my it happened about the time during my restoration. So the next thing I knew is I was having one baby after another, and I'm all going to do that, And one of them was Tara, and she was rambunctious. I was like, oh my gosh. So it ended up that even though it turned out to be quite lucrative too, even though it was so cheap, but when you get that many kids together, I offered it to a coach that I had met when Dallas was just very little, and she actually coached the Olympic team, so she was a mother of, I think, 9 or 10. Her name was Miss Grace. She was pretty scary, my children said, because I offered it to her. And she kind of dismissed it at first when she heard it was homeschooling, and you could tell right away, she was just like, this is a bunch of crazies. I don't know if I want to get mixed up in it. But when she heard how much I was bringing in, because all I did was rent a few lanes at a university pool during their quiet time. And so it cost me just about nothing to have the facilities, and then got paid on it. So she did that, but there was not a greater advocate for homeschooling than that woman after taking over the swim team. She said she had never seen, and I didn't know she had been a teacher, but she said she had never seen such well-behaved, respectful, kind, how they're able to talk to adults, how they interact with young children, because God didn't set it up that children were supposed to be segregated according to age. When you get that sort of situation, it's just not natural. A family, you don't have a litter. I mean, we have lots of litters now because there's, science has helped with fertilizing. There's very few that have, but it just, if you get 5 of one age together, and if they're not even from the same family and you don't know what's being taught and or anything about them, it's pretty hard, to really, really care for your children that way. But when you're around other homeschool families, most of them are doing it because they care so much about their children. Some have the same faith that you do. A lot of times, some of my closest friends they had at one of the big giant mega churches that we went to in Florida, when they were having a revival, a lot of the the parents started homeschooling because they would be staying past midnight, so how are you going to get up? So they started to do that and saw the benefits, just like you did. A lot of it you don't know until you do it, you see it on the outside or think, I can't do this. And you do go through growing pains. However, I have to say the transition from, bringing the children to school and then just being able to go out into our garage and do it and have the children in there, standing there, and they were all dressed. I think I even had them in their uniforms, Yvonne. That's so silly, and they stood next to their desk. We got at at a thrift store or charity shop. And I would have them stand. I would have them stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. I had an American flag there that one of the kids had, and then the younger children just played in the background. I made a tape, around, like, you can't come in here. This is our classroom, you can stay around there, and then you can play if you're quiet. If you're not quiet, you're going to have to sit up here, And so I always set up consequences. When my children used to say, about being bored, they'll tell their friends, we were never bored.
Never.
We mentioned to my mom that we were bored. We ended up doing work,
Yes,
So
exactly.
we never said anything, and they did. They kept themselves entertained. So anyway, that was, but
Yes.
that whole praise, and we did it again with our soccer. My son wanted to play soccer, and we ended up putting together a homeschool soccer team, and the coaches were university students, Pensacola Christian University students. And they were just amazed. And they just, and they both said they were young, they were young men, just at college age. And they both said that they were sure that they were going to make sure that they homeschooled their children. So, being around other, homeschool families and things really shows, well, there's the fruits, right? You can tell. It says you're going to be able to tell by the fruits. And so that's it. And, I love that you brought up the part about the curriculum that you need to do. But I know that you've shared that when a topic comes up that you may not even be aware that's being taught,
Yes,
to your children.
Exactly.
And you see it, and they can ask you openly and and talk about it. Then you can put it in. And in some ways, it's even better than, like, I picked out what we saw, and so they weren't exposed to it for me to explain it, and that was done by design, for my children. My children got to be in a greenhouse until Will Dallas was, he went all the way through and had a homeschool graduation, and then he went on to going to a ministry. There was a university that just was starting from the mega church that was having our revival at the time. And he enrolled in that, and he was only 16, and he did not have a regular high school diploma from a high school. We just put together a diploma, and we had a graduation with him and one other girl that was graduating. It was just the two of them who graduated, and we had it in a church service and had the graduation and things. But we couldn't address those kinds of topics, So there's a benefit to both, I mean, if I wouldn't want to introduce, like, hey, let's turn on the news and expose them to those kinds of things. However, if they're going to be around it, it's important, So if a child is going to a Christian school, for instance, or a public school, the hardest thing is that you don't know what's going on there, and you may not have that opportunity or that relationship. So all the time that you do have them, is doing as much home growing as you can with them. So that they know that they can talk to you, and you can talk to them about things, and just pray that they're protected, and God's going to use it all for good.
Yes,
for sure.
Yeah, because I remember the one instance that I remember now, and this was when Mia just started homeschooling. This was the first year of homeschooling. We were doing, I think the subject was life orientation or something, and they were learning about the different religions that is in our country and all over the world. And as she was reading through it, she could see, she would say, I can see that all of this is not true. I can see some of them can't be true. But how do we know that the religion that we have is the truth, Mom? And when she asked me that question, I thought, that's a deep question for a 10-year-old to ask to start with.
Very deep.
But secondly, I could answer her, but I was just thinking to myself, if she would have asked this of her teacher, would her teacher have been able to explain to her why?
And certainly not from the way you feel and based on your beliefs. That's the thing. You might got their beliefs. But I'm going through the Bible again, love it, 2 Corinthians, but it talked about your epistles, read by all men. And I wanted to be the person to write in my children's book, to instill those things. But like you said, you were able to answer it. That question, I don't know if I definitely, I wouldn't have known what to say. That would definitely be when I would be like, Well, let me pray about it, darling. I'll get back to you because I wouldn't have known how to answer that. I wouldn't have. But his grace is sufficient. That's one of our
Exactly.
favorite promises together. And no matter what it is, when you have a bunch of sickness and there's all kinds of things that are going to come up, but it's just like every day. I think the biggest thing I want everyone to take away from this one, if it's the only one we ever do, or the only one we do more of these for homeschooling, and it's the only one that they listen to, is that you are doing this for your children every day, and the whole stigma or the whole fear that's been instilled in, oh, it's a big responsibility, it's too difficult. All these things are just really lies, because it isn't that way. And you can make it that way on you. You can put it on yourself. That's why I say, whatever is easy, whatever is light, think about this as a long term, and make it so that it's enjoyable. And, just really work with your husband side by side with him, and really rely on him for everything. But it isn't any more difficult than having the children themselves. And as a matter of fact, the behavior and the closeness that you're going to get, the better behaved your children are going to become. It's easier. Also another perk is that when Dallas stopped going to school, he stopped bringing sickness home. That was one of the biggest joys. When he first went to kindergarten, he brought home chicken pox, was one of the first things. And so even Tyler, the baby, had chicken pox. But they were sick continuously when they didn't go to school. It was remarkable how little they got sick, But there's other things that they talk about. What about socialization? All these different things. So maybe we can have another one. I just noticed that our time, we only have like 2 minutes left. So I'm going to let you conclude it, because other than, I think I'm going to do on all my podcasts is, like, for this one would be mothers be encouraged. I'll leave everyone with that, but I'll let you, because I'm really bad at closing out things. Unless you have anything else to ask me in these last 2 minutes. I think
for now, we are good, because this is a very good introduction to the Enter by the Narrow Gate that we want to do. Just letting everyone know that homeschooling, it isn't what you may think it is. And if you as a mother wants to homeschool, just talk to him about it, because it's just a question of, he'll know, he knows exactly what each of us can do and what each of us is capable of, and just having your children there. And I think one of the things that is very important for us to know is to know that each of your children are unique, and that unique attention, it's only a mother that can give it to them, because that little baby from the day he or she was born, and there's no way that you don't know everything that's going on in that little mind of theirs.
And so you just have to be one lesson ahead. That's what I think. Just one lesson ahead. You could read it finish it 5 minutes before you turn it to them, if you have to teach it. And it's surprising the things that I was the worst at in my schooling, that I struggle with, history, geography, became the best at, because it was so easy as an adult, and I really started to like it. It's funny the way that is,
it is.
So whatever it is that you think that you can't do, it's just a lie, and to trust him for sure.
Exactly. Yes, I found that exactly what you said and it was actually geography and history that I just didn't like in school.
Oh, really?
But now, I
love it.
It's nice. I like it. It's interesting. Why didn't I like it in school? Yes, it definitely makes a difference.
It definitely does. Age makes a difference, and all those things that you were afraid of or that were difficult for you back when aren't going to be for you now,
For sure.
And so I think it's fantastic. I love what you said. Nobody loves their children more, and knows them more, I mean, no.
For sure. Okay, ladies. So this concludes our first podcast. Erin, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for being the hostess. I hope we can do more of these.
For sure. And ladies, just to finish this off, I want to let you know that in the description of this video, you'll find a link to Homeschooling for Him in our bookstore, as well as on our webpage, Homegrown Ministries, which is a website all on its own with a lot more information than just Homeschooling for Him. But I'm not going to go into all of that. Please go to the website, visit it, and see what's left there for you. There's a lot of things that you can learn from and see, and even that you'll be able to see and read, and it will bless you so much, not just for the children, but for the mothers as well. So, ladies, thank you for being here. Erin, thank you so much for being here, and we'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.